The polished chrome and frosted glass of the Apex Lounge gleamed under the recessed lighting, a sterile sanctuary for the hurried and the important. At its entrance stood Arthur Vance, his posture a gentle question mark against the sharp, clean lines of the doorway. He clutched a crumpled paper boarding pass in a hand gnarled by age and work, his worn tweed jacket a stark, woolen contrast to the sleek leather of the lounge chairs within. Facing him was Julian, the lounge manager, a man whose tailored suit seemed to be holding him perpetually upright, his smile as thin and sharp as a credit card. "Sir," Julian said, the word a carefully calibrated instrument of dismissal. "As I've explained, this is the Apex Lounge. It is reserved for our first-class and platinum-tier flyers. Your ticket, unfortunately, does not grant you access." The "unfortunately" was a lie, a small, polished stone of contempt he offered as a courtesy. Arthur's eyes, pale blue and clouded with the film of 9 decades, didn't focus on Julian's smug face, but rather on a point somewhere over his shoulder, into the calm sanctuary he was barred from. "My grandson," he said, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. "He told me to wait here. He'll be right back." Julian's smile tightened, the professional veneer cracking to reveal the raw impatience beneath. "Well, Grandpa," he said, the honorific now weaponized, dripping with condescension. "You can't wait in here. The general waiting area is back towards the B-gates. I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable there." The implication was clear. "You don't belong here with us. Go back to where you belong." Arthur didn't move. He didn't argue. He simply stood, a silent, unmovable object of quiet persistence. To Julian, he was just another frail old man, confused and out of place, a piece of litter marring the pristine aesthetic of his domain. An inconvenience, problem to be managed. But what Julian couldn't see, what no one in that glittering temple of modern travel could possibly know, was the truth hidden beneath the gentle stoop of his shoulders, a truth forged in fire and whispered in legends. For this was not just any old man. This was Arthur Vance. And the ground he stood on, the very air he breathed, was hallowed not by an airline's fleeting definition of premium status, but by the colossal weight of a history he carried in absolute, unbroken silence. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. We are the channel dedicated to uncovering the tales that remind us to look deeper, to see beyond the surface of what the world shows us. We believe that true honor is quiet, that true strength is gentle, and that real heroes walk among us every single day, completely unseen. If you believe in these truths, if you feel that pull to understand the stories that truly shape our world, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications. You will not want to miss a single moment of the story we are about to unfold. A story of dignity against disdain, of silence against noise, of a history that refuses to remain buried. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of one man's quiet life to reveal the giant sleeping within. The weight of his presence was not in his physical frame, but in the stillness he commanded, a stillness that infuriated the frenetic, status-obsessed world around him. Julian felt it as a personal affront. This old man's refusal to be dismissed, his quiet insistence on obeying a simple promise from his grandson, felt like a challenge to the fragile authority Julian had built for himself within these glass walls. The lounge was his kingdom, and this man was a peasant at the gates, refusing to bow. Julian's polished shoes tapped an impatient rhythm on the marble floor, a sound that echoed the frantic beat of his own shallow heart. He was a creature of surfaces, a man who judged the world by its labels, its price tags, and its access cards. Arthur Vance had none of these. He had only his word and a promise to his grandson. In Julian's world, that currency was worthless. The drama was just beginning. The world Arthur Vance inhabited was a universe away from the gleaming, impersonal corridors of the airport. His home was a small, meticulously tidy bungalow nestled at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. It was a house that seemed to have settled into the earth, comfortable in its own skin, asking for nothing. A slow, panning shot across his living room would reveal a life of profound simplicity. There were no trophies on the mantel, no framed commendations on the wall. No dramatic photographs of a younger, uniformed man shaking hands with presidents or generals. There was only a well-dusted bookshelf groaning under the weight of worn paperback novels, a comfortable armchair with the imprint of 1,000 quiet evenings, and a single, small, silver-framed photograph on the side table. It was a picture of a woman with a kind smile and eyes that seemed to hold the same gentle light as his own. His late wife, Eleanor. His life was a testament to routine, a quiet liturgy he performed each day. He rose before the sun, not with the jarring buzz of an alarm, but with an inner clock wound tight by a lifetime of discipline. The ritual of making coffee was a slow, deliberate meditation. The scoop of the grounds, the pour of the water, the rich aroma filling the small kitchen. He would then take his cup to the back porch and watch the birds descend upon the feeder he diligently filled each morning, a silent communion with the small, fluttering lives that depended on his quiet consistency. This was his world, a world of silence, of memory, of small, deliberate acts of care. The trip he was on was a rare and significant disruption to this sacred peace. His youngest grandchild was graduating from college, a milestone he felt compelled to witness. He did not like to travel. The noise, the crowds, the frantic energy of the modern world felt alien to him. He preferred the predictable solace of his garden, the familiar weight of a book in his hands. This journey was an act of love, a willing sacrifice of his own tranquility for the sake of family. Yet, even in this unassuming domesticity, there were subtle clues to the man he had been, whispers of a past he never spoke of. Despite the persistent limp in his right leg, he moved with a stark economy of motion. There was no wasted energy, no superfluous gesture. When he entered a room, his eyes didn't just wander. They swept, they assessed, they catalogued. It was a habit so deeply ingrained he was no longer aware of it, the ghost of a century forever on watch. As he reached for the sugar on a high shelf in his kitchen, his worn shirt sleeve would ride up his forearm, revealing for a fleeting moment the edge of a tattoo. It was faded, the lines blurred by time and sun, but its design was intricate and fierce. The suggestion of a serpent's coil, the tip of a wing, the hilt of a dagger. It was the only metal he still wore, a secret emblem etched into his very skin, a totem of a life he had locked away in the deepest vaults of his soul. The narrator's voice would be reverent, almost a whisper. He was a sentry standing a post long after the war was over. His watch was not over a perimeter of wire and sandbags, but over the perimeter of his own memories, ensuring they stayed locked away, silent and contained. He had commanded men. He had faced down horrors that would shatter the minds of lesser souls. He had walked through the valley of the shadow of death and emerged, not unscathed, but whole. And now, his greatest battle was against the ghosts of his own past, a battle he fought every day in the quiet theater of his own mind, armed only with routine and a stubborn, gentle peace. This section would be a deep, empathetic dive into his character, building a foundation of profound respect for the man before he is ever vindicated. It establishes his humility not as a weakness, a lack of self-worth, but as an immense, disciplined strength. It is the quiet honor that will soon clash so dramatically with the loud, empty arrogance of the world he has just entered. The antagonists in Arthur's story were not evil in the grand, cinematic sense. Theirs was a more common, more insidious kind of malice, the casual cruelty of the ignorant, the reflexive disdain of the superficially superior. Julian, the lounge manager, was the primary architect of this small, public tragedy. He was a man defined by his job, a gatekeeper to a trivial kingdom of free snacks and comfortable chairs. His self-worth was directly proportional to the exclusivity of the space he controlled. He had memorized the airline's hierarchy of status and applied it to all of humanity. In his meticulously ordered world, people were either apex, premier, gold, or, like Arthur, simply other. The others were invisible, an inconvenient backdrop to the lives of the important. To enforce these boundaries was to enforce his own sense of self. It was his daily affirmation. His power, though laughably small in the grand scheme of things, was absolute within this microcosm, and he wielded it with the unthinking arrogance of a petty tyrant. Joining him in this casual theater of disrespect was another character, a man named Mr. Davies. He was a passenger in the lounge, a man in his late 40s, dressed in an expensive but rumpled suit, barking into a Bluetooth earpiece about leveraged buyouts and hostile takeovers. He represented a different flavor of arrogance, the entitlement of wealth and corporate power. He saw the world as a series of obstacles and opportunities, and Arthur was an obstacle to his tranquility, a piece of grit in the smooth machinery of his day. The inciting incident, the moment that truly set the gears of this drama in motion, was Arthur's quiet, public humiliation. His grandson, a well-meaning but distracted young man named Ben, had indeed told him to wait right at the lounge entrance. "It's the easiest place to find you, Grandpa. I've just got to sort out this baggage issue. The queue is a mile long. I'll be right back, I promise. Just tell them you're with me." But the baggage issue was more complex than anticipated, a vortex of lost reservations and bureaucratic red tape that had swallowed Ben whole. And so Arthur waited. As the minutes ticked by, Julian's irritation festered. He saw Arthur's continued presence not as an act of patience, but as an act of defiance. He strode back to the entrance, his posture rigid with manufactured authority. "Sir," he said, his voice louder this time, designed to be overheard, "I have already told you, you cannot loiter here. You are disturbing our premier guests." He gestured vaguely towards the cavernous terminal. "You need to move along. Now." From inside the lounge, Mr. Davies looked up from his laptop, his face a mask of annoyance. "For goodness sake, Julian, can't you just get him out of here? Some of us are trying to conduct business." He said it with the weary sigh of a man burdened by the incompetence of the world, making sure everyone in the lounge could hear his important complaint. Julian, emboldened by his audience, puffed out his chest. The support of a premier guest was the validation he craved. He turned back to Arthur, his voice taking on a hard, threatening edge. "This is your final warning, sir. If you do not move along immediately, I will be forced to call airport security." Arthur's response was the same as before, delivered in that same quiet, factual tone. "I will wait," he said, his gaze unwavering. "He told me to wait." It was not a plea. It was not an argument. It was a simple statement of fact, a declaration of his commitment to a promise. But in the charged atmosphere of Julian's fragile ego, it landed like a thrown gauntlet. This quiet refusal to be dismissed, this simple dignity in the face of public scorn, was an act of rebellion he could not tolerate. The injustice was now cemented, witnessed, and about to escalate. The quiet hero had been publicly challenged, and the stage was set for the painful rising action of his ordeal. The humiliation, as it so often does, began its slow and steady escalation. Julian, his authority now publicly on the line, made good on his threat. With a theatrical sigh, he picked up the phone at his podium, his voice dripping with performative regret for the benefit of his audience in the lounge. "Yes, I need security at the Apex Lounge, Concourse C. We have a situation. An elderly gentleman, refusing to cooperate." The words painted a picture of a belligerent, possibly senile old man causing a scene, a gross distortion of Arthur's profound stillness. A few minutes later, 2 airport security guards arrived. They were not imposing figures. They were men in ill-fitting uniforms, their faces etched with the weary boredom of a long shift. They were not malicious, merely cogs in a large, impersonal machine, tasked with keeping the human river flowing smoothly. Julian met them with an air of grave importance, recounting his version of events with dramatic flair. "I've asked him repeatedly to move along. He's not a ticketed guest for this lounge and he's bothering our clients. He just won't listen." He gestured towards Arthur, who stood exactly where he had been, a silent statue of patience. At that moment, the narrative lens shifts, finding our observer. Her name is Sarah, a young woman in her early 20s, working at the airline's customer service desk just opposite the lounge. It was her 3rd week on the job, and she was still wide-eyed and a little overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the airport's human drama. She had noticed Arthur earlier, when he had first approached the lounge. She'd seen the gentle way he held his boarding pass, the quiet dignity in his posture that seemed so at odds with his worn clothes. From her vantage point, she witnessed the entire exchange with Julian. She saw the manager's preening arrogance and Mr. Davies's loud, performative disdain. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. Something about it felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. She watched as the two security guards approached the old man. She expected to see fear in him, or anger, or confusion. But she saw none of these. She saw a deep, weary patience. The look of a man who had waited in far worse places, under far greater duress. She noticed the way he stood, not slumped in defeat but rooted to the spot. His back straighter than men half his age. His shoulders squared despite the slight stoop of his spine. As one of the guards, trying to be gentle, placed a hand on Arthur's arm to guide him away, his tweed jacket sleeve hitched up for a fraction of a second. It was a fleeting glimpse, a blink can you'll miss it moment, but from Sarah's angle it was a perfectly clear view. On the weathered skin of his forearm, just below the wrist, was a tattoo. It was faded, the ink bleeding into the soft wrinkles of his skin, but the design was unmistakable. A winged dagger, clasped in the talons of an eagle, with a serpent coiled around the blade. Sarah didn't know what it meant. She had no military background, no frame of reference for such an emblem, but it radiated a kind of fierce, official gravity. It was not the whimsical anchor or faded heart of a youthful indiscretion. It looked important. It was a symbol that clashed violently with the image of the confused, vagrant grandfather that Julian had painted. This was her moment of cognitive dissonance, the catalyst for her growing conviction. The piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. She felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness for this silent old man. She felt compelled to act, to say something, but what could she, a new hire, a nobody, possibly do? For now, all she could do was watch, her heart aching with a borrowed sense of injustice. The seed of vindication had been planted, not in anger, but in the quiet observation of a compassionate stranger. The security guards, after a brief, quiet conversation with Arthur, quickly ascertained he was no threat. He wasn't belligerent. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't crazy. He was just an old man, waiting for his grandson. Their protocol for such a situation was simple de-escalation. They wouldn't arrest him or formally detain him. They would simply remove him from the sphere of the complaining party. "Sir, you need to come with us," one said, his voice softer than Julian's. "We'll find you a place to sit down." They escorted him away from the gleaming entrance of the Apex Lounge, across the wide, polished concourse, to a row of hard, plastic chairs bolted to the floor near a shuttered newsstand. It was a place of transit, of waiting without comfort. "Just wait here, sir," the guard advised, a hint of sympathy in his tone. "Don't go back over there. Okay?" Arthur simply nodded and sat down. And so began the long wait. This is where the true measure of the man's character was revealed, not in a moment of action, but in hours of profound inaction. The narrative slows, adopting Arthur's own patient rhythm. 1 hour bled into the next. The morning rush subsided into the midday lull, which then swelled again into the afternoon's frantic energy. The light from the massive terminal windows shifted, crawling across the floor like a slow-moving sundial, marking the passage of time on a scale that seemed indifferent to human affairs. Arthur sat, a still point in a turning world. The life of the airport swirled around him, a chaotic ballet of hellos and goodbyes, of reunions and departures. People rushed past, their faces illuminated by the pale glow of their phones, their minds already in another city, another time zone. A child threw a tantrum nearby, his screams echoing in the cavernous space. Announcements for delayed flights and final boarding calls blared from the public address system, a constant, nagging symphony of urgency. Through it all, Arthur remained still. He didn't fidget. He didn't sigh. He didn't get up to pace. He simply sat, his gnarled hands resting on his knees, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen horizon. He was a master of waiting, a man who had learned the hard lesson that time moves at its own pace, and that rage and impatience are merely wasted fuel. Back in the serene bubble of the Apex Lounge, Julian was holding court. He had transformed the minor incident into a dramatic anecdote, a testament to his managerial prowess. "You should have seen him," he said with a chuckle to Mr. Davies, who was now enjoying a complimentary scotch. "Just stood there like a statue. I will wait. So dramatic. I swear, these old guys think they're still in the war or something. Okay, Rambo, time to move along." They shared a smug laugh, a small, ugly moment of bonding over their shared superiority, completely oblivious to the colossal irony of Julian's joke. The dramatic irony for the audience is thick, almost painful. We know who he is. We know the truth. And their ignorance makes their mockery all the more profane. Meanwhile, Sarah, the young customer service agent, couldn't shake the image of the tattoo from her mind. On her 15-minute break, she huddled over her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. She typed in every variation she could think of: military tattoo winged dagger eagle, Special Forces insignia serpent dagger, U.S. Air Force elite unit tattoo. The search results were a frustrating mix of video game logos, fantasy art, and vague forum posts. But there were threads, whispers of elite, clandestine units, pararescue jumpers, combat controllers, names that meant little to her, but they all pointed in the same direction, to the very tip of the spear. The results were not definitive, but they were enough. They were more than enough to confirm her gut feeling that a terrible mistake had been made. A wave of shame washed over her. Shame for her own inaction. Shame for the casual cruelty she had witnessed. The quiet old man in the hard plastic chair was not who they thought he was. He was someone else entirely. And he was still waiting. The hours stretched on, each one a small lifetime in the sterile, timeless limbo of the airport terminal. 8 hours. The sun, which had been a bright morning glare on the polished floors, was now a soft, golden afternoon light, beginning its slow descent. Arthur sat. He was tired. His joints ached with a dull, persistent fire. A deep hunger gnawed at his stomach. But his dignity, the core of him, remained untouched, an unbreachable fortress. The catalyst for the final act came not from a confrontation, but from a mundane piece of airport logistics. Ben, his grandson, finally free from the bureaucratic labyrinth of the baggage claim office, realized with a jolt of panic how much time had passed. His phone calls to his grandfather's simple flip phone had gone unanswered. In desperation, he called the main airport information line and pleaded with them to send someone to find an old man named Arthur Vance, last seen near the Concourse C Lounge. A different airport employee, a woman whose voice was frayed with the stress of 1,000 similar requests, was dispatched. She found Arthur still in his plastic chair, his posture unchanged. "Arthur Vance?" she asked, her tone brusque. "Your family is at gate C-34. They're on the other side of the terminal. Your flight is boarding now. You're going to miss it if you don't run." Arthur stood, the movement slow and stiff. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he steadied himself on the back of the chair. He knew, with a calm certainty, that he would not make it. Gate C-34 was a world away, and his leg, the one with the old, deep ache, was screaming in protest. Still, he started to walk, his limp more pronounced than ever, a slow, determined shuffle against the tide of rushing passengers. His route took him, by cruel coincidence, directly past the entrance of the Apex Lounge one last time. Julian, standing at his podium, saw him coming. A smug, triumphant smirk spread across his face. He couldn't resist the final twist of the knife. He stepped out of the doorway, blocking Arthur's path. "Well, look who it is. Still here?" he said, his voice laced with a sweet, false poison. "I thought security took care of you. You'd better hurry along now, Grandpa, or you'll miss your flight to wherever it is you're going." It was a completely unnecessary act of cruelty, a final assertion of his pathetic dominance. He said it for his own benefit to savor his victory. It was this final, petty insult that broke the dam. Sarah, the observer from the customer service desk, witnessed it all. She had been watching Arthur for hours, her concern growing with every passing minute. This last public piece of mockery was too much to bear. It was a profound and unforgivable offense against a man who had shown nothing but quiet grace. The image of the winged dagger tattoo flashed in her mind, now not just a curiosity, but a call to action. She had to do something, and then she remembered. Earlier that day, a small, distinguished group of military officers had checked in at her desk for a flight to Washington, D.C. They were older men, their faces etched with authority, their Air Force dress uniforms immaculate and heavy with medals. She remembered the respectful hush that had fallen over the check-in area as they approached. She remembered the insignia on their luggage. They were important. They commanded respect. On a desperate, wild whim, a surge of adrenaline propelling her, Sarah abandoned her post. She started to run. She didn't know exactly what she would say. She didn't know if they would even listen. But she knew, with a certainty that resonated in her very bones, that they were the only ones who could correct this terrible, silent injustice. Her desperate race against time had begun. The terminal was a maze of human traffic, but Sarah moved through it with the singular focus of a heat-seeking missile. She dodged luggage carts, sidestepped dawdling families, and sprinted down the long, echoing concourse, her heart pounding in her chest. She found them at their gate, a small island of quiet authority in the sea of chaos. For men, standing with the ramrod-straight posture that decades of service instills. One of them, she saw from the 4 silver stars on his shoulder boards, was a full general. For a moment she faltered. Who was she to interrupt these men? But then the image of Arthur's patient, weary face and Julian's mocking smirk flooded her mind, and her resolve hardened. She skidded to a halt in front of them, gasping for breath. "Sirs," she panted, her voice trembling slightly. "Excuse me. I'm so sorry to interrupt." The general, a man with piercing gray eyes and a face that looked like it was carved from granite, turned to her. His expression was one of mild, impatient curiosity. "Can we help you, miss?" "There's an old man," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Back in Concourse C, the lounge manager, the security. They're being awful to him. They've made him wait for hours. They're mocking him. But I think he's one of you." The general's eyebrows furrowed. "One of us. He has a tattoo," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "On his forearm, a winged dagger, an eagle's talons, and a snake coiled around the blade." The change in the general's demeanor was instantaneous and absolute. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The mild impatience vanished, replaced by a look of intense, laser-like focus. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He exchanged a single, silent, powerful glance with the 3 other officers. A universe of understanding passed between them in that one look. "Show us," the general said, his voice a low, urgent command. The narrative slams into slow motion. Their 4 pairs of polished black dress shoes began to move, hitting the polished marble floor with a heavy, rhythmic impact that seemed to shake the very air. Thud, 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 the sound of impending judgment. The camera focuses on their stern, set faces, the rows of brightly colored ribbons on their chests telling stories of forgotten wars and distant battlefields. Their presence a wave of pure, undiluted authority that parted the swirling crowds of the terminal like the Red Sea. Travelers stopped their hurried walks. Conversations died mid-sentence. People instinctively stepped back, their faces a mixture of curiosity and awe. The casual, chaotic noise of the airport was swallowed by a heavy, profound, and anticipatory silence. They moved not like men walking, but like a weather system rolling in, an unstoppable force of nature. They arrived back at the Apex Lounge at the precise moment Julian was delivering his final, condescending blow. "Honestly," he was saying with a shake of his head as Arthur tried to shuffle past him, "some people just have no shame." Julian, absorbed in his own petty drama, didn't notice their arrival at first. But he felt the change in the atmosphere. He felt the sudden, crushing weight of the silence. He turned, a flicker of annoyance on his face, and saw them, for figures of immaculate, intimidating authority, standing like avenging angels. He saw the 4 stars on the general's shoulders, and the blood drained from his face. His smug expression didn't just fade. It shattered, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The climax had arrived. Julian stood frozen, his world tilting on its axis. The smug lounge manager, the king of his tiny chrome and leather castle, was suddenly a very small, very insignificant man. Inside the lounge, Mr. Davies, who had been watching the scene with detached amusement, stood up abruptly, his jaw slack, the half-empty glass of scotch trembling in his hand. The general paid them no mind. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, were locked on one person and one person only, Arthur Vance. As he looked at the frail, stooped figure in the worn tweed jacket, the granite hardness of his expression softened, melting away to reveal something else entirely. A look of profound, absolute and undiluted reverence. He took one deliberate step forward, his back ramrod straight. He brought his right hand up to his brow in the sharpest, most impeccably executed salute Julian had ever seen in his life. It was not a gesture of protocol. It was an act of worship. In perfect, synchronized unison, the other 3 decorated officers followed suit, their movements a testament to a lifetime of shared discipline. A silent, powerful tribute in the middle of a stunned airport terminal. Arthur looked up, his pale blue eyes meeting the general's. And for the first time since this ordeal began, a flicker of deep emotion crossed his face. It was not surprise. It was a deep, weary recognition. The look of a man seeing ghosts from a life he had tried so hard to bury. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement that passed between 2 old soldiers across a gulf of years. The general held the salute for a long, pregnant moment. Then he lowered his hand and he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it resonated with a power and authority that filled the vast, silent space. Each word a carefully polished stone dropped into a still pond. "Sir," he began, the word "sir" now imbued with its truest, deepest meaning. "General Marcus Thorne, United States Air Force. We were on our way to the dedication ceremony at the Air Force Academy." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The dedication for the new special warfare training facility. The one they named after you, sir." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Julian's face, already pale, turned a ghostly white. The general turned his head just slightly, his gaze sweeping over Julian like a searchlight, cold and unforgiving. He didn't raise his voice, but it cut through the air like shrapnel. "You see this man?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You see this grandpa you were so eager to dispose of? Your eyes, son, they see old age and a worn-out coat. My eyes see the man who single-handedly conceived and led Operation Nightfall. They see the sole survivor of the 17-day siege at Outpost Kilo 7. They see the architect of the Vance Doctrine of Personnel Recovery, the doctrine that has been directly responsible for saving over 2,000 American lives since he first sketched it out on a blood-soaked napkin in the back of a crashing helicopter." As he spoke, the script would call for on-screen text to flash, stark and white against a black background. Operation Nightfall, top secret, eyes only. Outpost Kilo 7, Congressional Medal of Honor, unclassified 2018. The Vance Doctrine, U.S. Air Force Pararescue Cornerstone. The general's monologue was a torrent, a flood of suppressed history unleashed. This man's limp, that you find so inconvenient? He earned that dragging 6 of his wounded men, my men, across 50 miles of hostile terrain, under constant fire, for 3 days and 3 nights. This man's faded tattoo? That is the original insignia of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. A unit so secret its very existence was denied for 30 years. A unit he didn't just serve in. He founded it. He commanded it. We don't call him Arthur. We don't call him Sir out of protocol. We call him Legend. We call him the Shepherd, because in 50 years of service, in the darkest corners of the world, he never, ever left a man behind. The monologue concluded, leaving a vacuum in its wake. The truth, in all its staggering, heroic weight, had finally been revealed. The general's final words hung in the air, dense and heavy as granite. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the deafening sound of 100 different recalibrations happening at once. It was the silence of shame, the silence of awe, the silence of a world turned completely upside down. Julian looked as though he had been physically struck by an invisible force. His carefully constructed reality, built on a foundation of shallow judgments and premier status cards, had been pulverized into dust. His face was a canvas of shock and dawning horror. He opened his mouth, perhaps to form an apology, an excuse, a plea, but no sound emerged. He just stood there, a hollow man in a tailored suit that now looked like a cheap, ill-fitting costume. He visibly shrank, his posture collapsing under the weight of his own monumental ignorance. Inside the lounge, Mr. Davies had backed away from the plate glass window, trying to merge with the shadows, his face burning with a shame so intense it was almost visible. He was no longer a captain of industry. He was just a fool who had laughed at a giant. The general turned his attention back to Arthur, his expression softening once more into one of pure, filial respect. "They're holding the plane for you, sir," he said, his voice gentle. "The flight to D.C. We would be deeply honored if you would accompany us." It was an invitation to be celebrated, to be seen, to finally accept the accolades he was due. But Arthur Vance was not a man moved by accolades. His response was true to the very core of his character. He looked at the 4-star general, at the medals, at the reverent faces of the officers. Then his gaze dropped to the polished floor. A long, contemplative pause stretched out. "The boy," he said, his voice still that quiet, dry rustle. "My grandson. He's waiting for me at gate C-34. In that moment he revealed his truth. Not the medals, not the classified missions, not the vindication. His family, the promise he had made. That was his bedrock. That was his mission now. As if summoned by the words themselves, a young man came pushing frantically through the stunned crowd. It was Ben, his face pale with panic and worry. "Grandpa! Oh my God! I'm so sorry. The flight was a nightmare. They lost the booking. I couldn't call and..." He stopped dead in his tracks. He saw his quiet, unassuming grandfather being saluted by a 4-star general and a trio of highly decorated officers. He saw the looks of awe and shame on the faces of the crowd. His expression shifted from frantic apology to utter, slack-jawed confusion. The resolution began, not with a triumphant roar, but with a quiet exchange. The general stepped toward Ben, lowering his voice to a respectful murmur. "Your grandfather," he said simply, "is one of this nation's greatest heroes. It is an honor to meet you." Ben looked from the general to his grandfather and back again. A lifetime of seeing this quiet, gentle man who grew prize-winning roses and told terrible dad jokes was now crashing against the reality of this unbelievable scene. Awe, confusion, and a dawning, profound respect bloomed on his young face. Arthur didn't bask in the moment. He didn't wait for Julian's apology or acknowledge the stares of the crowd. He simply gave the general a small, grateful nod, a silent thank you that spoke volumes. He then placed a steadying hand on his grandson's shoulder. "It's all right, son," he murmured. "Let's go. We'll be late." And with that, he turned. With his grandson at his side, he began his slow, limping walk away from the scene of his humiliation and his vindication, leaving the general, the shamed lounge manager, and the silent, astonished crowd in his wake. He didn't look back. His honor had been restored, but he sought no spoils of war. He remained Arthur Vance, the quiet hero, his truest victory not the public recognition, but the simple act of walking away humble and whole. And just like that, he was gone. No victory lap, no grand speech, no uniform, no salute in return, no ceremony in the echoing halls of the airport. He simply melted back into the river of humanity, just a grandfather walking with his grandson, on his way to a graduation. He hadn't asked for respect. He hadn't demanded an apology. He had not uttered a single word in his own defense. Because honor, true honor, isn't a badge you pin to your chest for others to see and admire. It is not an access card to a private lounge. It is the quiet, unshakable truth of who you are, a truth you carry inside you, whether the world acknowledges it or not. The narrator's voice returns, filled with a deep, reflective emotion. The camera lingers on the aftermath. On Julian, standing frozen, a man whose entire value system has been exposed as a hollow sham. He is a ghost at the gates of his own meaningless kingdom. On Sarah, the young customer service agent, who watches Arthur's retreating back, a single tear of relief and awe tracing a path down her cheek. She has not just witnessed an event. She has received an education. She will never again look at a quiet old man, a struggling mother, or a weary janitor in the same way. She has learned to look for the story beneath the surface. The moral of the story begins to crystallize, broadening from this specific incident to a universal truth. How many heroes walk among us, hidden in plain sight, their greatness cloaked in the simple, unassuming camouflage of everyday life? How many legends are living quiet lives in quiet towns, their epic stories locked away behind humble eyes and gentle smiles? They are the quiet janitors who know every child's name. They are the patient grandfathers who tend their gardens. They are the lonely figures on a park bench, watching the world go by, holding within them histories that could fill volumes. They don't ask for our praise. They don't seek our recognition. They only ask, in their profound and powerful silence, for a little bit of our kindness, a little bit of our grace, a little bit of the respect that every human soul deserves, regardless of the ribbons on their chest or the balance in their bank account. He was a story without a cover, a king without a crown, a hero without a cape. His power was not in what he did, but in who he was, and who he was needed. No defense. The narrative now turns to directly address the viewer, completing its final, inspirational arc. The world is full of people like Julian, people who are quick to judge by the cover, who build their sense of self by diminishing others. And it is full of heroes like Arthur, who have lived lives so extraordinary they have forgotten they are even in the book. The question is, who are we in this story? Are we the ones who look away, who participate in the casual judgment? Or are we the ones who, like Sarah, dare to look closer, to question the surface, to see the potential for greatness in the quiet and the overlooked? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Have you ever misjudged someone, only to discover later that they were truly extraordinary? Your story could be the very thing that inspires someone else to look a little closer, to listen a little harder. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of quiet dignity, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe to Stories That Matter and click the notification bell for more tales that celebrate the quiet power and the hidden honor of the human spirit. Until next time, look for the hero in everyone. They are there, waiting,